So David Wood in a recent live stream was presented with evidence that Muhammad, peace be upon him, or rather the author of the Quran, was a Christian, and the first generation of Muslims, also known as the companions or the Sahaba of the Prophet, peace be upon him, were actually Christians. And this is what he had to say.
Yeah, I think it's entirely plausible to say that Islam began as a cult, as a Christian cult.
Now, subhanAllah, this is actually a proof of prophethood, as I'll soon explain. I'll be giving you guys two gifts later on in this video. But do you know what caused David Wood to be open to the idea that Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions were Christians?
You asked me excellent question.
So I'm going to be providing you guys with a bit of context as to how this occurred in the conversation. And this is actually quite important for you to get an idea of what exactly is going on here and how this can be used as proof for Islam.
And it seems quite clear that the Quran in many places uses the same style of phrase. Like one of them, for example, is the camel going through the eye of the needle. That's in our Gospels, and it's also in the Quran. And it's a very particular and peculiar phrase, and that's why we can be quite confident, according to Gabriel Reynolds and others, that the Quran is actually addressing Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because it seems to borrow turns of phrase from them. Mm-hmm. So these are good reasons why, according to modern scholarship, the Quran, in the context it was written in, is indeed referring to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And from the paradigm of people who are coming in contact with Muslims, they don't call them Muslims, they call them Ishmaelites, or they'll call them Hagareans, or Saracen, I can't pronounce the word now, Saracens, I think. Mm-hmm. So there's this understanding that these early followers of Muhammad are people going around saying they affirm the Torah and they affirm the Injil, and they say that Jesus is the Messiah. And to a lot of people, that would have sounded very, very Christian at the time. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot to go into with the historical origins of Islam.
Yeah, I think it's entirely plausible to say that Islam began as a cult, as a Christian cult.
So as Chris pointed out, there are some phrases that can be found within the Quran that show that the author of the Quran is very familiar with the Bible. And no, it's not only that the Quran is familiar with biblical stories, but it's quite familiar with biblical phraseology. And not only that, but the author of the Quran actually knows Hebrew. Check it out. Our eighth example is the phrase, we hear and disobey. In Arabic, سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا, which the Quran puts in the mouth of the Israelites on two occasions. Here, the Quran seems to follow quite closely the wording of a phrase in the Hebrew Bible, which, however, has quite the opposite sense. He continues, tellingly, however, is the negative version, Arabic سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا, that matches the positive version in Hebrew. وَشَمَعْنُ وَعَصِينُ. Here we have one of the relatively rare cases where Hebrew phraseology seems to have influenced the Arabic text of the Quran. So basically what's happening here is the Quran is taking a Hebrew phrase and Arabizing the term. Not translating it, but Arabizing it in order to give it the opposite meaning. So instead of the Jews saying we hear and obey, it's pretty much the Jews saying we hear and disobey. And this is brilliant because not only does it show that the Quran is familiar with biblical phraseology and that the Quran is familiar with Hebrew, but it's using it in an eloquent way. It's putting some sort of a Hebrew pun within the Quran itself.
The Quran is one of the worst things we've ever read. It's absolute horrifyingly bad, painful to read.
Now, when you match this with the examples of the Quran conflicting with the Bible, you naturally come to the conclusion that it's not simply conflicting with it unintentionally. No, it's completely intentional. And here's another example for you guys, since I love you guys so much. In Genesis 20, Abraham is afraid that a king is going to kill him and steal his wife. So he basically tells the king that his wife is actually his sister. Later in the chapter, God tells the king to return Sarah to Abraham because she's his wife. The king, out of fear, returns Sarah to Abraham, but asks him, "Why did you do that? Why did you tell me that she's your sister?" Abraham says, "I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife." Okay? So there you go, Christians. Abraham, according to the Bible, of course, is a friend of God, Isaiah 41, but here he's someone who's committing incest by being married to his sister. So Christians, how exactly do you get out of this one? You get out of this one by accepting that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a messenger of God, because he corrects this in the hadith where he points out that Abraham, peace be upon him, actually lied. But hey, if you Christians want to believe that Abraham was committing incest, then, go ahead. Now, the weird thing is that Muhammad, peace be upon him, in this hadith is correcting this blasphemy against a friend of God, a righteous man, a prophet from God, and for some reason you're going to have some goofballs claiming that this was done accidentally.
Why? They're saying it right here. It's in Hebrew. He doesn't understand it. His companions don't understand it. Fareed, if I'm wrong, and no, you've actually have a view that makes sense of this and you're not misrepresenting this, but if you're sitting here saying that, hey, if Muhammad contradicts something in the Bible, that's because he knows what's in there. He knows what's in there. He's familiar with it. He's familiar with what the Hebrew says. He's studied it carefully, and now he's saying, now I'm correcting what they're saying, so I'm not affirming it. That's insane. We don't believe that. And how would you believe it, given what he says in passages like this? Well, we don't know what the Hebrew says. We have no idea.
Yo, you just said a few minutes ago that the Bible was written by some Arabs that were from a Christian background. Have you been taking one too many hammers to the head? Now, if the first Muslims were actually Christians, then they would be familiar with biblical stories. And of course, as I've shown in this video, they actually knew Hebrew, or at least the author of the Quran did. When Muhammad, peace be upon him, provides information that conflicts with the Bible, and he exonerates a prophet of God, Abraham, from this filth that you have, which is incest, then he's not just simply conflicting with it, but no, he's correcting the information within. So you can't have it both ways, Dr. David Wood. You can't claim that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is from some sort of Christian background while being familiar with Christian turns of phrase, and then accidentally correcting the Bible. But of course, as a Muslim, I do have a solution to this problem. Muhammad, peace be upon him, definitely, I agree with you, he did not know Hebrew. And the companions, as you've shown, they did not know Hebrew. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah in all his wisdom, Allah, the all-knowing, knows Hebrew. He knows what's in the Bible, and he corrects the Bible. But hey, keep believing that Abraham committed incestuous intercourse, and keep believing that God came in the form of a man, and keep playing dress up with your atheist pet who actually believes that that man was the most successful deceiver in the history of humankind. Oh, and by the way, if the Quran is actually correcting the Bible, then there goes your ridiculous Islamic dilemma argument. For more examples of the Quran correcting the Bible, do check out Jake's video on the subject. And to the rest of you guys, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We accept you, one of us, gooba gobble, one of us, we accept you, we accept